Please subscribe to our channel to follow this incredible story and more captivating tales. I'm a farmer, born and raised on the wide, dusty plains where the horizon stretches endlessly. My skin is kissed by the sun, my hands calloused from years of tending crops in this unforgiving land. The desert is a harsh neighbor, silent but always watching. One morning, as I walked the edge of my fields, I noticed something odd. A small shape, barely visible against the shimmering heat, lay curled in the sand. My heart skipped. Nothing living should be out here alone. I approached cautiously, my boots crunching softly. The shape was a child, frail and sunburned, eyes wide with fear. I knelt beside them, offering water from my flask. Who was this child, and how had they survived the desert's wrath? The child's clothes were tattered, barely clinging to their thin frame. I carried them to my truck, my mind racing with questions. 10 years ago, a local girl vanished, her face plastered on every newsstand. Could this be her? I drove to my farmhouse, the child silent in the passenger seat. Their eyes darted, taking in the world like they'd forgotten it existed. I offered food, but they only nibbled, wary. The desert had marked them, not just on their skin but in their soul. I called the sheriff, my voice steady but my heart pounding. What had this child seen in those 10 years? The sheriff arrived, his face grim as he listened to my story. He recognized the child's features, though time had worn them down. Could be her, he muttered, pulling out a faded missing poster. The resemblance was uncanny, but the child didn't speak. I watched as they sat on my porch, clutching a blanket I'd given them. The desert stretched beyond, vast and secretive, holding answers it wouldn't share. I wondered what truths lay buried in its sands. The sheriff took notes, but I felt the weight of something bigger. This wasn't just a rescue, it was a mystery unraveling. Night fell, and the child stayed with me while the authorities searched for answers. I sat by the fire, watching them sleep, their breathing uneven. The desert had kept them alive, but at what cost? I thought of the stories my grandmother told, tales of spirits in the sands. Was this child touched by something beyond our understanding? I shook off the thought, but it lingered. The next morning, the child pointed to a drawing in my old journal. It was a sketch of a desert oasis I'd seen years ago. Their finger trembled, and I felt a chill. I drove to the oasis, the child beside me, silent but alert. The place was hidden, a pocket of green in the barren waste. I hadn't been there in years, but the child seemed to know it. They stepped out, barefoot, and walked straight to a cluster of rocks. I followed, my heart thudding. Beneath the rocks was a small, weathered box. Inside were trinkets, a locket, a toy, things a child might cherish. The child's eyes filled with tears, and I knew these were theirs. How had they known where to look? The sheriff called with news. The child's DNA matched the missing girl's. 10 years, and she was alive. But the questions grew heavier. Where had she been? Why here now? The child still wouldn't speak, but their eyes held a story too vast for words. I sat with them at the oasis, the desert whispering around us. I felt like I was on the edge of something sacred, something ancient. The child traced patterns in the sand, patterns that seemed deliberate. I wondered if the desert had taught them its secrets. Days passed, and the child began to trust me. They ate more, their frame filling out slightly. I showed them my fields, my crops, my life rooted in this harsh land. They watched with quiet curiosity, as if relearning the world. One evening, they pointed to the stars, their finger steady. I followed their gaze, seeing constellations I'd never noticed. The desert sky was alive, and I felt small under its weight. The child's silence was no longer empty, it was full of meaning I couldn't yet grasp. The town buzzed with rumors about the child's return. People came to my farm, curious, some kind, others skeptical. I protected the child, keeping them close. The sheriff shared fragments of the case. No trace of the child had been found in 10 years, no leads, no hope. Yet here she was, alive, a miracle or something else. I noticed the child avoided mirrors, as if afraid of their own reflection. At night, they whispered names I didn't recognize. The desert had changed them, but how? I took the child to the doctor, who confirmed they were healthy but malnourished. No signs of abuse, no explanation for their survival. The child clung to me, their small hand in mine. I felt a bond growing, a responsibility I hadn't asked for. The oasis kept pulling me back in my thoughts. I returned alone one night, staring at the rocks where the box had been. The desert felt alive, watching me. I found a carving on a stone, initials, maybe hers. It was old, weathered by time. The child began to draw, filling pages with images of the desert, canyons, dunes, strange symbols. I studied them, searching for clues. One drawing showed a figure, tall and shadowed, standing over a child. My stomach twisted. Was this a memory? A dream? I asked the child, but they only shook their head. The sheriff warned me not to push, but I couldn't stop. The desert had given me this child, and I needed to know why. I felt the weight of their 10 lost years. Weeks passed, and the child's silence began to break. They spoke in fragments, words like light and shadow. I listened, piecing together their story. They described a place in the desert, a hidden canyon where time felt different. I knew the area but had never explored it. The child's eyes lit up when I mentioned it, urging me to go. I hesitated. Something about their urgency unnerved me. But I couldn't ignore their plea. The desert was calling us both. We set out at dawn, the child guiding me with a certainty that chilled me. The canyon was narrow, its walls towering like ancient sentinels. The child moved with purpose, as if they'd walked this path 1,000 times. We reached a cave, its entrance hidden by brush. Inside, the air was cool, the walls etched with symbols like those in the child's drawings. I felt a hum in my chest, like the desert itself was breathing. The child knelt, touching the ground reverently. The cave held relics, pottery, beads, things older than my family's history. The child pointed to a carving of a figure, the same shadowed shape from their drawing. They whispered, "He kept me." My blood ran cold. Who was he? A person? A spirit? The child wouldn't say more, but their eyes were haunted. I took photos, determined to understand. The desert had secrets, and this child was tied to them. I felt like I was trespassing on sacred ground. Back at the farm, I studied the photos, the symbols burning into my mind. I called an old friend, an archaeologist, who gasped when she saw them. "These are ancient," she said, "tied to a lost tribe." She spoke of legends, a guardian of the desert, a being who protected or claimed lost souls. I looked at the child, playing quietly in the yard. Had they been claimed? Protected? I couldn't shake the feeling that the desert wasn't done with them. Or with me. The child began to speak more, their voice soft but clear. They described nights under the stars, drinking from hidden springs. They spoke of the shadowed figure teaching them to survive. I listened, torn between awe and fear. The desert had sustained them, but why? The child said the figure told them to wait. For what? They didn't know. I felt a pull to return to the cave, to confront whatever lingered there. The child nodded when I suggested it, as if they'd been waiting too. We returned to the canyon, the child calmer now, almost at peace. The cave felt different, warmer, alive. The child led me deeper, to a chamber I hadn't seen before. There, a pool of water glowed faintly, reflecting the symbols on the walls. The child dipped their hand in, and the water shimmered. I saw shapes in it, faces, maybe, or memories. The child smiled for the first time, a weight lifting. I realized the desert hadn't just kept them alive, it had chosen them. The archaeologist joined us, her excitement palpable. She documented everything, whispering about a discovery that could rewrite history. But I cared less about history than the child. They seemed to belong here, in this cave, with these symbols. I asked if they wanted to stay with me, to build a life on my farm. They nodded, but their eyes drifted to the desert. I knew part of them would always belong to it. The shadowed figure, whoever or whatever it was, had left its mark. The town began to accept the child's return, though questions lingered. Reporters came, but I shielded the child from their cameras. The sheriff closed the case, calling it a miracle. I didn't argue, but I knew it was more. The child's drawings grew more intricate, showing landscapes that didn't exist, or hadn't yet. I wondered if the desert had shown them the future. At night, I sat with them, listening to their stories of survival. Each word felt like a gift. The archaeologist published a paper, hinting at the desert's secrets without revealing the child's role. I was grateful for her discretion. The child, now stronger, helped me in the fields. They laughed sometimes, a sound that warmed my heart, but their eyes still searched the horizon, as if waiting for something. I began to dream of the desert, of the shadowed figure watching me. Was it real? Or was the child's story seeping into my soul? I didn't know anymore. One evening, the child asked to return to the oasis. I drove them, the desert silent under a full moon. They walked to the rocks, placing a new trinket, a stone they'd carved, beside the old box. They whispered something, too soft for me to hear. The air felt heavy, charged with meaning. I realized this was their ritual, their way of thanking the desert. I stood back, respecting their moment. The child was no longer just a survivor, they were a bridge to something ancient. Months passed, and the child grew into their new life. They went to school, made friends, but never lost their connection to the desert. I watched them closely, proud but wary. The cave's symbols haunted me, appearing in my dreams. I began to research, digging into old texts about the desert's myths. The shadowed figure appeared in many stories, a guardian, a trickster, a god. I wondered if it had chosen me, too, by leading me to the child. The desert felt alive in a way it never had before. The child's drawings became a map, guiding us to new places in the desert. We found hidden springs, ancient carvings, signs of a forgotten people. Each discovery felt like a gift, but also a warning. The desert was sharing its secrets, but at a price. The child seemed to understand this, their eyes older than their years. They spoke of balance, of respecting the land. I listened, learning from them as much as they learned from me. We were bound by this mystery. One day, the child asked me to build a small shrine at the oasis. I helped them, hauling stones under the blazing sun. They arranged them carefully, placing their carved stone at the center. It was a quiet moment, but it felt monumental. The desert seemed to approve, the air still and warm. I realized the child was honoring not just the desert, but the shadowed figure. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. The shrine was their truth, their way of closing a chapter. The archaeologist returned, bringing colleagues to study the cave. They were careful, respectful, but I worried about the desert's reaction. The child watched from a distance, their face unreadable. That night, a sandstorm swept through, fierce and sudden. The researchers' equipment was buried, their plans delayed. I looked at the child, wondering if they'd known. They only smiled, a secret in their eyes. The desert protected its own, and the child was part of it. Life settled into a rhythm, the child growing stronger, their laughter more frequent. They called me Dad one day, and my heart swelled. I hadn't expected this bond, this family born from the desert's mystery. But the questions remained. What had kept them alive? Why had they returned now? I stopped seeking answers, accepting that some truths belonged to the sands. The child's presence was enough, a miracle I didn't need to dissect. The desert had given them to me, and I was grateful. The child began to teach me about the desert, its rhythms, its secrets. They showed me how to find water, how to read the wind. I'd lived here all my life, but they saw things I'd missed. Their knowledge felt ancient, as if the shadowed figure had passed it down. I wondered if they were meant to carry this wisdom forward. The desert was changing me, too, opening my eyes to its depth. I felt like a student, learning from a child who'd seen beyond the veil. One night, the child woke screaming, their face pale with fear. They spoke of the shadowed figure, standing at the edge of the farm. I checked, but found nothing, just the endless desert under the stars. The child calmed, but their fear lingered in me. Was the figure real, or a memory haunting them? I held them close, promising safety. The desert was vast, but my resolve was stronger. I'd protect this child, no matter what came. The town celebrated the child's return with a festival, a way to heal old wounds. The child stood beside me, shy but proud. People shared stories of hope, of miracles, but I saw the truth in the child's eyes. They'd survived not by chance, but by something greater. The desert had chosen them, shaped them, and now they were shaping us. I felt proud, not just of them, but of the bond we'd forged. The desert had brought us together. Years later, the child, now a teenager, still visited the oasis. They'd grown tall, their eyes still carrying that ancient weight. They spoke less of the shadowed figure, but I knew it was never far from their thoughts. I'd built a life around them, my farm now their home. The desert remained our constant, its secrets safe with us. I wondered what the future held for them, for me. The child was a gift, a mystery I'd never fully solve. As I sit on my porch now, the desert stretching before me, I think of that day I found the child. The sands haven't changed, but I have. The child is my family, my purpose. The desert gave them back, not just to me, but to the world. I don't know what lies ahead, but I know we'll face it together. The shadowed figure, the symbols, the oasis, they're part of us now. The desert's story lives in us, and I'm honored to carry it. Thank you for listening to our tale. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to our channel for more mysteries and heartfelt journeys.